Well, Ukraine has made it absolutely clear in recent months that it is running out of weapons, with growing concerns about recent Russian advances on the front lines there. After months of apparent stalemate, Ukraine withdrew its troops from the key eastern town of Avdiivka in mid-February. Moscow says it has since taken control of several villages around that city. Now, Kyiv is trying to reinforce its front lines with soldiers from at least 30 different countries joining the fight. DW's Carolina Chimoy recently met two soldiers in the town of Kramatorsk in the Donetsk region who've travelled all the way from South America to help defend the country against Russia.
This is what a site looks like just after a missile strike. It was this man's home. His son, ex-wife and grandmother all died. He moved out just a week ago. The only thing left to do is try to find intact belongings. This is the place where the missile hit yesterday at night. At least 3 people died and 9 are wounded. The impact could be felt around 9 kilometers away from here. We were just a couple of kilometers away, hiding in a basement. Most people here don't often seek shelter anymore.
We're accustomed to the sirens. You know, when they're silent, it's even scarier. We, the people of Kramatorsk, are accustomed to them. Something is constantly flying over our heads. It's very difficult and frightening.
These men have traveled halfway around the world to be amid the violence. They are Colombians. Today, they're on a rest day, but when on duty, they fight side by side for the Ukrainians in the trenches.
Yes, we're face to face with the enemy. We're fighting against them constantly.
They see us, we see them. They go out. These are strategies to get us out as well.
They're members of Ukraine's International Legion. Even though they don't speak Ukrainian or English, military experience and a will to fight is enough. They came to do what they know best, fight at war.
When I heard President Zelensky asking for foreign soldiers to join the battle and defend this country, I did everything possible to come here. The Ukrainian government welcomed us. They gave us the opportunity to be here, to belong to the Ukrainian armed forces, which I fulfill with great pride.
After 18 months, Javier decided to extend his contract. But how long does he want to stay away from home?
Until the end of the war, until Ukraine marches to victory, and I hope that God gives me the opportunity to be in Kyiv on that day in the victory parade with that giant flag they have here in Ukraine.
Enrique says that for him, the fight has become personal.
Ukraine has already won my heart. Ukrainians have won my heart. I have Ukrainian friends now. I know many stories of Ukrainian families. That has really made an impression on me, and that's why I decided to stay much longer. War is not good, but my duty now is to help and protect Ukraine.
To protect Ukraine from attacks like this one on a school. Things like this infuriate fighters from around the world, as well as locals.
They're targeting civilian structures. What do you think this is? Some kind of military facility? What's going on? We need a lot more help. If we just get it bit by bit, the war will drag on for a very long time.
Help that civilians and soldiers in Ukraine are desperately waiting for.
Carolina Chimoy authored that report in Ukraine and joins me now in the studio to talk more about her first-hand experience covering this story. Good to see you. You've spent a lot of time in South America before that posting in Ukraine. I wonder, what was it that you most wanted to ask two Colombians fighting the Russians in eastern Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly, Anthony. I mean, the question is pretty obvious, right? The first question that popped into my mind was like, what are you guys from Colombia, a beautiful country? I mean, not that Ukraine is not a beautiful country, it's also a beautiful country, but I mean, their families are in Colombia. They're risking their lives in Ukraine, in the trenches. They're fighting a fight that is not their own country, far away, cold weather, all of that. What are you doing here? And of course, the first thing they told me was like, Ukraine is not a war that is only for Ukrainians. This is a war that the whole world has to fight because it's about democracies against autocracies. So it's also a political ideology. They told me they have fought in Colombia against socialism, communism, and they were ready to do the same, not only in Ukraine, but in any other country that would need their help. But then they also asked me the same question. Yes. You grew up in Germany and in Latin America. What are you doing in Ukraine, in the middle of Eastern Ukraine, asking me these questions? And of course, they had a point. I was doing my job. I was covering, and I am covering, the war in Ukraine, and so are they. So there's also a financial component to all of this. Right. They're getting money for their work. They are militaries. They are retired from the Colombian army. And that is also a way to work abroad, to get some extra money, good money. I mean, we know that they didn't confirm this because they're not allowed to, but we know that they get up to $3,000 a month for being there in the trenches and fighting the Russians. So there are these two components, like the political ideology, but also the financial part of it, right?
And from the Ukraine point of view, how great is the need for Ukraine to source soldiers from other places? Why is there this demand for what seems a dramatic and somewhat exotic solution, if you like? Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned it at the beginning. Ukraine is running out of weapons, of course, of ammunition. That's what everyone is talking about. But also manpower. They need soldiers. Soldiers are dying very fast at the front. We've had already 2 years of war. We're in the third year. The Ukrainian soldiers are tired. And they're trying to get soldiers from all over. Everyone who wants to join the fight is allowed to join the fight. Now, the International League, where these Colombian soldiers are joining, are fighting, they're even doing some publicity for it in different languages. They're, for example, saying if you only speak Spanish, even if you don't speak Ukrainian or English, we want your help. We want you to work here. We're looking for you. And they translated their whole homepage into English. So they're really doing kind of advertisement for international soldiers to join them in this fight. And it seems to work out. It's not only Colombians. There are also people from Peru, from Brazil, but also from different parts of the world joining this fight in Ukraine.
Great to have you in the studio. Good to meet you. Thanks for sharing, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Anthony.
The White House is sending $300 million worth of weapons to Ukraine. The assistance is the first in months from the US and was announced by President Biden while he was hosting Polish leaders in Washington. His decision sidesteps the US Congress, which is still stalling over an even bigger aid package for Kyiv. And the US President says time is running out to help Ukraine on the battlefield.
Today, the United States is announcing an emergency package for Ukraine using cost savings from previously approved Pentagon contracts. The package includes munitions and rounds to help Ukraine hold the line against Russia's brutal attacks for the next couple of weeks. But it's not nearly enough what I'm announcing today. Congress must pass the bipartisan national security bill now, which includes urgent funding for Ukraine. We must act before it literally is too late, before it's too late.
Now, speaking after his White House meeting, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said he hoped the US Congress would pass the stalled aid package for Kyiv. Tusk said Ukraine's fate depended on US lawmakers.
Despite the problem in the House, and I still hope that Mr. Johnson will feel this responsibility for thousands of lives in Ukraine, because in fact he is responsible for the future of ordinary people. The only message we should send to Moscow is that the West is united more than ever before when it comes to Ukraine.
Now, DW's Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber is following this story for us in Washington and told us how US domestic pressures are playing into the debate over funding for Ukraine.
The elections are coming up, and we see how both Democrats and Republicans continue arguing over this bill. What should be sent, what should not be sent, because there's so much in this package that has been stalled in Congress for a long time now. That's something that President Biden has been pushing for. He pushed it on his speech for the State of the Union, also when he speaks to other allies. And we hear and we also see U.S. officials, when they talk to European allies, saying that the U.S. will continue Ukraine as long as needed. That's something that the White House has repeatedly said, but that's why today, when they said that they would send this $300 million, this emergency fund, they said this is only a part. This will give Ukraine munition for a few weeks, but for them to be able to defend themselves in long term, they need more support, and therefore pressing also not just the Republicans, but also their own Democrats to say that they should not be sending so much more weapons to get this bill through as quickly as possible for more help for Ukraine.